The year is 793 CE. The morning mist clings to the shores of Lindisfarne, a holy island off the coast of Northumbria. Monks go about their daily routines, transcribing ancient texts in their scriptorium, unaware that this peaceful morning would mark the beginning of an era that would reshape European history. As the sun rises higher, dark shapes emerge from the fog. Long ships with dragon heads, their oars cutting through the water like silent serpents. The Viking Age has begun. But who were these Norse raiders who would strike such terror into the hearts of European Christians? To understand the Vikings, we must journey to their homeland, the rugged fjords and valleys of Scandinavia. Here, in a land where winter holds court for half the year, a unique culture had been brewing for centuries. The Norse people lived in a harsh but beautiful world, where survival demanded both strength and ingenuity. Their societies were organized into complex networks of free farmers, nobles, and kings. Each family farmstead was a self-contained unit, producing everything from food to tools, clothing to weapons. But it was also a land where population growth and limited fertile soil created intense competition for resources. The Norse worldview was shaped by their harsh environment and rich mythology. They believed in a cosmos centered around Yggdrasil, the world tree, its branches holding 9 different worlds. Their gods were not distant, perfect beings, but rather flawed and relatable figures who fought, feasted, and faced their own doom with courage. This mythology emphasized personal honor, courage in the face of fate, and the importance of reputation, values that would drive Viking exploration and expansion. Their shipbuilding technology was revolutionary for its time. The Norse developed vessels that could navigate both deep seas and shallow rivers, using a combination of sail and oar power. These ships were lightweight enough to be carried across land, but strong enough to weather North Atlantic storms. The clinker-built design, with overlapping planks, created vessels that could flex with the waves rather than fight against them. This maritime innovation would become the key that unlocked Europe's waterways to Viking exploration and trade. As the 8th century drew to a close, several factors converged to spark the Viking expansion. Climate change had made farming more difficult in parts of Scandinavia. Population growth put pressure on limited resources. Political consolidation under ambitious kings pushed some nobles to seek fortunes elsewhere. Advances in shipbuilding technology made long-distance raiding and trading possible. The wealth of European monasteries, largely undefended, presented tempting targets. The attack on Lindisfarne in 793 CE was not the first Viking raid, but it was the one that announced their presence to the wider world. The monastery was wealthy, isolated, and defenseless, a perfect target. The Vikings' attack was swift and devastating. They killed many monks, took others as slaves, and stripped the monastery of its valuables. The psychological impact of this raid reverberated throughout Christian Europe. How could God allow his holy places to be desecrated by pagans? But this was more than just a simple raid. It was the beginning of a complex historical process that would transform both Scandinavia and Europe. The Vikings were not just warriors, they were also traders, settlers, explorers, and state builders. Their influence would reach from the North American coast to the Byzantine Empire, from the Arctic Circle to the Mediterranean. As our story continues, we will see how these Norse adventurers would establish trading networks stretching thousands of miles, found new kingdoms, and eventually reshape the political and cultural landscape of medieval Europe. This was the dawn of the Viking Age, and its impact would echo through centuries to come. As the 9th century unfolded, Viking ships began appearing with increasing frequency along Europe's coastlines and rivers. But while the popular imagination focuses on raids and violence, the reality was far more complex. The Vikings were establishing sophisticated trading networks that would connect the frozen shores of the Arctic with the warm waters of the Mediterranean. The key to Viking success lay in their mastery of waterways. Their ships could cross open seas and navigate shallow rivers with equal ease. This versatility allowed them to establish trade routes that would have been impossible for other medieval vessels. The most ambitious of these was the route from Scandinavia to Constantinople, the Osterweger, or East Way. Following the great rivers of Eastern Europe, the Dwina, the Dnieper, and the Volga, Viking traders, known as Rus to the Slavic peoples, established a network of trading posts that would eventually grow into powerful cities. Novgorod became a major center for fur trade. Kiev grew into the heart of what would become the Kievan Rus Staraya. Ladoga served as a crucial way station for traders. Hedabai emerged as one of Northern Europe's largest trading towns. The goods that flowed along these routes tell us much about the medieval world. From the north came furs, amber, walrus ivory, and slaves. From the east arrived silk, spices, silver coins, and precious stones. From the west came wool, weapons, and wine. From the south came glass, fine textiles, and exotic luxuries.
But trade was only part of the story. The Vikings were also establishing permanent settlements across Europe. In Ireland, they founded Dublin, Waterford, and Limerick as trading ports. Along the Seine in France, a group of Vikings led by Rollo established what would become Normandy. The great heathen army invaded England and established the Danelaw, a region under Viking law and custom.
The Vikings' impact on urban development was significant. Their trading posts often grew into important medieval cities. They introduced new forms of commerce and craftsmanship to many regions. Archaeological evidence shows sophisticated workshops producing everything from jewelry to ship parts in Viking settlements. Their trading activities also led to cultural exchange. Viking traders adopted foreign customs and religions, often acting as cultural intermediaries. Many returned home with new ideas, technologies, and artistic styles. The Viking aesthetic began to incorporate elements from Celtic, Slavic, and Islamic art. The scale of Viking trading operations required sophisticated financial and legal systems. They developed standardized weights and measures, complex contract laws, and assembly places, things where disputes could be settled. These institutions would influence medieval European legal and commercial practices. However, the relationship between trade and raiding was complex. Many Viking traders were also raiders when opportunity presented itself. Some scholars argue that raiding actually helped establish trade routes by forcing local rulers to negotiate agreements with Viking leaders. The payment of danegeld, tribute paid to Vikings to prevent raids, often led to more formal trading relationships. By the mid-9th century, Viking influence had reached unprecedented levels. Their trading networks stretched from Greenland to Baghdad. Their settlements dotted coastlines from Ireland to Russia. Their silver hoards contained coins from across the known world. Their craftsmanship was influencing artistic styles across Europe. The Vikings had become more than just raiders. They were now key players in medieval Europe's economic and political landscape. Their trading networks would lay the groundwork for many modern European cities and trade routes. But as we'll see in the next part, their greatest impact would come through permanent settlement and state building. By the mid-9th century, Viking ambitions had evolved from seasonal raiding to permanent conquest and settlement. This transformation would fundamentally alter the political landscape of medieval Europe and create lasting Norse kingdoms that would shape history for centuries to come. The Danelaw, Viking England. The establishment of the Danelaw represents one of the most significant Viking settlement projects. It began in 865 CE with the arrival of the great heathen army, led by the sons of the legendary Ragnar Lothbrok. Unlike previous raiding parties, this was a massive force with territorial ambitions. The campaign that followed would reshape England. York fell in 866, becoming the Viking capital of Jorvik, East Anglia, was conquered in 869. Mercia was partially occupied by 874. Only Wessex, under Alfred the Great, maintained its independence. The Danelaw wasn't just a military occupation, it was a thorough colonization. Norse settlers brought their families, customs, and way of life. They distributed land among themselves, established farms, and created new social hierarchies. Their influence can still be seen today in place names ending in by, Thorpe, and Thwaite. Legal terms and concepts adopted into English law. Agricultural practices and land division systems. Linguistic contributions to the English language. Ireland experienced Viking settlement differently. Rather than conquering large territories, the Norse established coastal trading towns that would become significant urban centers.
Dublin, Dyflin, became the largest slave market in Western Europe. Waterford, Vedrafjordr, served as a major trading port. Limerick, Llymrecker, controlled access to Ireland's interior via the Shannon River. Cork, developed as a vital commercial center.
These Viking towns were more than just trading posts. They were sophisticated urban centers with their own kings, laws, and customs. They introduced urban living to what had been a largely rural society and created lasting connections between Ireland and the wider Norse world. Perhaps the most transformative Viking settlement was in northern France. In 911, the Viking leader Rollo negotiated with King Charles the Simple of France to establish what would become Normandy. This arrangement proved remarkably successful. Viking raiders transformed into Norman aristocrats. They adopted French language and culture while maintaining Norse military traditions. They developed a unique architectural style and political system. The Normans would later conquer England, Sicily, and parts of the Middle East.
Viking expansion wasn't limited to mainland Europe. They established lasting settlements across the North Atlantic.
Orkney and Shetland became Norse earldoms. The Faroe Islands were colonized and remain culturally distinct today. Iceland was settled from 874, creating a unique Norse republic. Greenland hosted Viking settlements for nearly 500 years. Brief settlements were established in North America at L'Anse aux Meadows in the east. Viking settlers known as the Rus established a dynasty that would create one of medieval Europe's largest states. The Rurik dynasty established control over Novgorod Kiev, became the center of a powerful new state. The Rus adopted Slavic culture and Orthodox Christianity. They maintained trading connections with both Scandinavia and Byzantium. The process of settlement. Viking settlement was a complex process that involved social integration, intermarriage with local populations, adoption of local customs and religions, preservation of Norse legal and social traditions, development of hybrid cultures, economic development, introduction of new trading patterns, establishment of urban centers, development of specialized crafts, integration of local and Norse agricultural practices, political innovation, creation of new forms of kingship, development of sophisticated legal systems, establishment of representative assemblies, formation of feudal relationships, cultural exchange, adoption of Christianity, blending of artistic styles, development of new literary traditions, exchange of technological innovations. The settlement period marked a crucial transition in Viking history. The raiders had become rulers, traders, and city builders. Their settlements would have lasting impacts on European society, politics, and culture. These Norse colonies would serve as bridges between different parts of medieval Europe, facilitating cultural and economic exchange. As we'll see in the next part, this period of settlement led to profound cultural changes, both for the Vikings and the societies they joined. The process of cultural integration and exchange would create new hybrid societies that would shape medieval Europe's future. The Viking Age marked one of the most significant periods of cultural exchange in medieval European history. As Norse settlers integrated into their new homes, they both influenced and were influenced by the societies they encountered, creating rich new cultural syntheses that would shape European civilization for centuries to come. Religious transformation. Perhaps the most profound change was the gradual conversion of Viking society to Christianity. This process varied significantly across different regions. In Scandinavia, Harald Bluetooth's conversion of Denmark, 965 CE, Olaf Tryggvason's forceful Christianization of Norway. The dramatic conversion of Iceland at the Althing, 1000 CE. Sweden's gradual transition under Olaf Skutkonung. The conversion process was complex and often syncretic. Christian churches were built on old pagan sacred sites. Norse mythology and Christian traditions blended in art and literature. Traditional festivals were recast as Christian celebrations. Old beliefs persisted in folklore and custom. Artistic innovation. Viking artistic influence created new styles that blended Norse, Celtic, and Christian elements. The Viking art styles: Oseberg style, 800 to 875. Gripping beasts and complex interlace. Boris style, 850 to 950. Ring chain patterns and animal motifs. Gelling style, 900-975. Ribbon-shaped animals and mask motifs. Mammon style, 950-125. Elaborate vegetal ornament. Ringerike style, 1000 to 1050. Flowing lines and naturalistic animals. Urnez style, 1050 to 1100. Elegant, elongated animals and sculptural quality. These styles influenced manuscript illumination, stone carving and rune stones, metalwork and jewelry, wooden architecture, textile design, literary legacy. The Viking Age produced a rich literary tradition that would be preserved in medieval manuscripts. The sagas. Family sagas, Islendingasögur, depicting settler life. King's sagas, Konungasögur, recording royal histories, legendary sagas. Fornaldarsögur, preserving ancient tales. Contemporary sagas, Samtidarsögur, documenting recent events. Poetic traditions, skaldic poetry with its complex metrics and kennings, Eddic poetry preserving mythological and heroic tales. The development of new poetic forms in Norse colonies. Historical documentation. Runic inscriptions recording events and memorials. Latin chronicles describing Viking activities. Anglo-Saxon accounts of Viking invasions. Arab travelers' accounts of the Rus' linguistic impact. Viking settlement left an indelible mark on European languages. English language. Basic words: sky, egg, knife, die, take, window. Legal terms: law, bylaw, thing, assembly. Place name elements: by, Thorpe, Thwaite. Personal names: Roger, William, Richard. Norman French. Maritime terminology, military vocabulary, administrative terms. Irish language, trading and maritime vocabulary. Personal names and place names, administrative terminology. Social and legal innovations. Viking settlements introduced new social and legal concepts. Legal systems. Thing assemblies for dispute resolution. Jury systems and collective decision-making. Complex compensation systems. Property rights and inheritance laws. Social structures. New forms of urban organization. Trading partnerships and guilds. Military organization and feudal relationships. Land management systems. Technological exchange. Vikings were both innovators and transmitters of technology. Maritime technology, advanced shipbuilding techniques, navigation methods, harbor construction, maritime law and custom, craft technologies, metalworking techniques, textile production methods, building construction, agricultural innovations. Urban development. Viking settlement contributed to medieval urbanization. New urban centers. Dublin's development as a major port. York's transformation into Jorvakiev's emergence as a Rus capital. Normandy's urban network. Urban features. Planned street layouts. Defensive structures. Commercial districts. Port facilities. Cultural synthesis. The result of Viking settlement was not simple assimilation, but rather the creation of new hybrid cultures. Norman culture. French language with Norse influences. Viking military traditions. Norman architectural style. Feudal social organization. Anglo-Scandinavian society. Blended legal systems. Mixed artistic styles. Hybrid religious practices. Integrated social structures. This period of cultural integration laid the groundwork for many aspects of medieval European civilization. The Vikings' role as cultural intermediaries helped connect different regions of Europe and facilitated the exchange of ideas, technologies, and artistic styles. As we'll see in the final part, this cultural legacy would long outlive the Viking Age itself, continuing to influence European society well into the modern era. As the 11th century drew to a close, the Viking Age was coming to an end. But rather than a sudden collapse, this was a gradual transformation as Norse society became fully integrated into medieval European civilization. The legacy of the Viking Age would continue to shape European history for centuries to come. The end of an era. Several factors contributed to the conclusion of the Viking Age. Political changes, consolidation of Scandinavian kingdoms, strengthening of European defenses, rise of feudal military systems, integration of Viking settlements into European political structures. The Norman conquest of 1066 is often considered the symbolic end of the Viking Age. William of Normandy's victory at Hastings. The last great Norse expedition to England in 1066. Final transformation of Viking warriors into feudal knights. End of independent Viking kingdoms in the British Isles. Religious transformation. Complete Christianization of Scandinavia, integration into European church hierarchy, establishment of Scandinavian dioceses, decline of Norse pagan practices, economic changes, development of medieval trading systems, rise of Hanseatic League, decline of traditional Viking trading routes, evolution of urban centers, lasting influences. The Viking Age left permanent marks on European civilization. Political legacy, formation of modern Scandinavian nations, Norman influence across Europe, Russian state formation, parliamentary traditions, legal heritage, influence on English, common law, Scandinavian legal systems, concepts of representative government, property rights and inheritance laws, cultural impact, linguistic influences, artistic traditions, literary heritage, archaeological remains, maritime legacy, navigation techniques, shipbuilding traditions, maritime law trading practices, the transformation of Scandinavian society. The end of the Viking Age saw fundamental changes in Scandinavian society. Political development, emergence of strong monarchies, development of state institutions, integration into European politics, creation of national identities, social changes, feudalization of society, urban development, church organization, new economic systems, cultural evolution, adoption of European customs, development of written culture, new artistic styles, changed worldview. The Viking diaspora. Viking settlements evolved into distinct societies. Normandy. Development of Norman culture, expansion into England and Mediterranean, architectural innovations, military traditions. England. Anglo-Scandinavian society, linguistic influence, legal traditions, cultural practices, Scotland and Ireland. Norse Gaelic culture, maritime traditions, urban development, artistic styles. Russia. Rurik dynasty, state formation, trade networks, cultural synthesis, archaeological legacy. The Viking Age left rich archaeological evidence, material culture, ship burials, treasure hoards, urban remains, craft products, monuments, runestones, church buildings, defensive works, settlement sites, art objects, metalwork, wooden carvings, textiles, jewelry, modern legacy. The Viking Age continues to influence modern culture, historical impact, national identities, cultural heritage, political institutions, legal systems, popular culture, literary works, media representations, cultural festivals, historical reenactment, academic study, archaeological research, historical investigation, linguistic analysis, cultural studies, tourism, heritage sites, museums, cultural routes, historical attractions. Conclusion, the end and the beginning. The end of the Viking Age wasn't truly an ending, but a transformation. The Vikings didn't disappear, they evolved. Their descendants became the Normans, Anglo-Scandinavians, Scots-Norse, and Russ. Their innovations in shipbuilding, navigation, trade, law, and governance became integral parts of medieval European civilization. The legacy of the Viking Age can be seen in the languages we speak, the laws we follow, the stories we tell, the places we live, the way we think about exploration and adventure. The Viking Age represented a crucial period of cultural exchange, innovation, and transformation that helped shape medieval Europe and, by extension, the modern world. While the raiders no longer sail from the fjords, their influence continues to resonate through history, reminding us of an era when the Norse people changed the course of European civilization. Their story serves as a reminder that historical change often comes not through simple conquest or replacement, but through complex processes of interaction, adaptation, and integration. The Vikings may have begun as raiders, but they ended as creators of a legacy that would endure for centuries to come.